Like, hey guys, like, how's it going? Like, oh my goodness, we are gonna add some more rational numbers. So this time we have a fraction and a decimal that we have to add together. Oh my goodness, what are we gonna do? Well, we talked about this in the last video. What do we have to do if we have one of each? Can we add a fraction to a decimal? I don't know what this accent is. It started out Valley Girl and now it's like, I don't even know. But we are going to add negative 2/5 plus 2/3. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you two ways. This is on page 189 in your books. You can fill this in. Okay. The accents, it's kind of hard to keep those up for a long period of time. And it's kind of annoying. I got to find a good one that's not so annoying. You can either change them both to decimals or both to fractions. So we're going to do this both ways. But they do have to be the same form. So let's start by writing them both as decimals. Negative 2/5 as a decimal is negative 0.4. So we went over this process in class the other day. Remember that to change a fraction to a decimal, we have to take the top number divided by the bottom number. Now, there are some common decimals that you might want to memorize. For instance, 1/2 is 0.5. 3/4 is 0.75, 1/4 is 0.25, but then the fifths are also good ones because they're pretty common. Like 1/5 is 0.2, 2/5 is 0.4, 3/5 would be 0.6, then 0.8. So those might be ones that you might want to just learn so you don't have to divide it out each time. But now that they are in the same form, then we're going to just add those two numbers together. So remember that with decimals, you do want to line them up. And think about it. Because I have a negative plus a positive, I'm actually going to subtract these decimals. So 2.3 minus 0.4. This will be a 1. This will be a 13. Minus 4 is 9. 1 minus 0 is 1. The decimal point brings straight down. So it's going to be 1.9. And then since the larger number is positive, it'll be positive 1.9. So 1.9 is my answer for this one in decimal form. So that's one way. Change them both to decimals and add them. But again, you can only do this if this is a terminating decimal. So if this was like 2/3, where it just keeps going 0.6666666, you can't do that. You would have to change them to fractions. So if we want to change them both to fractions, you can watch this video and see how that is done.
To add rational numbers in different forms, begin by writing the numbers in the same form. One way to add a fraction and a decimal is to write the decimal as a fraction. When writing a decimal as a fraction, use the place value of the final digit as the denominator of the fraction. If the fractions have different denominators, rewrite one or both fractions using a common denominator. To rewrite a fraction, multiply its numerator and denominator by the same number. Next, add the fractions. Move any negative signs to the numerators of the fractions. Then, add the numerators and write the result over the common denominator. Finally, simplify the sum and rewrite as a mixed number.
So again, this is on page 189, and you can see that we get 1 9/10 as a fraction, or 1.9 as a decimal, and 9/10 you guys should know is 0.9. So those are the same thing, just one in fraction form, one in decimal form. Let's look at another example. This is not in your book, so you can write this in the margins on page 189. But again, if we want to change this from a or if we want to add these together and we have one of each, 1/7 as a decimal is actually like a really large decimal value. So let me see that again. Yeah, it actually ends up repeating, I believe. So we're going to have to write these both as fractions. So like they said in the video, if I'm going to write these both as fractions, since this is in the tenths place, we're going to write this as 83 over 10. So we would just move the decimal over, and this will be 83 over 10. Because if you think about 83 divided by 10, that's going to give you 8.3. So whatever place value this is, that's my denominator. And then I'm going to write this number without the decimal point. Okay with that? And then 7 and 10. What would be the least common multiple of 7 and 10 that we want to make our denominator? Well, multiples of 10 are 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. Multiples of 7, 7, 14, 21. And so the lowest common denominator is actually going to be 70. So I'm going to have to multiply this fraction by 10 over 10, and this one by 7 over 7. So these are some big numbers that we're working with here. So this is 10 over 70 plus, oh my goodness, 83 times 7 is 21. Carry the 2. This is 56, 581. So 581 over 70. Well, lucky for us, these are both positive. So we just add those two together to get 591 over 70. And then if we want to change it to a mixed number, we'll just divide. 70 goes into 590. Let's see, 6, 7, 8 times. This would be 560, and then 31. So 8 and 31/70. So these are some kind of big, crazy numbers for this problem. But why don't you try the check problem on page 189. That one's not quite as crazy. And that one you could actually change to decimals if you'd rather, or you can change it to fractions. It's totally up to you. But try that check problem on the bottom of page 189. So pause that and try that one there. And then we are going to skip example 6 and go to example 7. Again, some of these, it's kind of a waste of time to just have to add on all these by hand. But we will look at one more example. So this one is the lowest recorded elevation in the U.S., the contiguous? That just means like the 48 states that are connected to each other. Is 282 feet below sea level, is in Death Valley. So suppose you began a hike in the parking lot near Badwater Basin at 266 feet below sea level. The stopping points of the hike and the elevation traveled are shown below in the table. What is the elevation of your stopping point? So these are the stopping points. You start at negative 266 feet. Then you've gone down 12.5 feet. Then you've gone up 26 3/5. Then you've gone down 3.5, and then you've gone up 397.3. So there's a lot of things we can do here, but really we're just adding all of these numbers together essentially. So we will start with negative 266, then we're going to add negative 12, add 26, add negative 3, add this. But we have some fractions, some decimals. So let's start by changing all of our fractions to decimals. In this case, I think it'll be easier to work with decimals. So since the fractions, the denominators are 2 and 5, those are easy to convert. So negative 3.5, you guys should know, is negative 3.5. And then 3/5 is one of those common ones. 3/5 is 0.6. So now we've changed everything to a decimal. And now we have to have all those decimals added up. So if we want, we can put all the negative numbers together and the positive numbers together and add all the negatives and add all the positives. And if we do that, we get negative 282 plus 423. So instead of like doing 2 at a time, it might be easier because if these are all negative, then we add all these. If these are positive, then we add all these to get these values here. Now we have one negative, one positive. Now we will subtract those. and get our final answer, which is 141.9. So let's look at another example of that, because that was kind of a confusing problem here, I know. But we'll do one together. So at a summer camp for girls, Camp Giant Tree, the chef needs to make sure there's plenty of flour available for all her recipes. She begins the month of June with 173.9 pounds and tracks her weekly use along with the supply delivery the camp gets in the middle of the month. How much flour do they have at the end of June? Write in simplest form using a fraction. I am going to use a, actually, hold on. All right, I'm not going to have you guys worry about this one, but try the check problem on the top of page 192. That one will be easier to change to decimals. For these longer ones, it's really not worth the time to do all these by hands, just because you do have calculators. So I'm not going to pretend that you guys don't know how to use them or don't have them available to you. So for the longer problems, it really is not worth the time. However, on page 192, the check problem, those you can change to decimals very easily. So the ones that are decimals, I do want you to get some practice adding and subtracting with the decimal values. The main thing is that you know how to add and subtract decimals and fractions, and not that we're spending time doing super long problems doing these by hand. So do the check problem on page 192, and we'll stop there with that. If you don't have your books, here it is. I'm going to bring it up for you to look at, and you can write this down on your separate sheet of paper. But just a couple problems for the video today. And then we start subtracting tomorrow. So there it is. This is the check problem. So pause this and try this, and we'll stop there. Okay, have a good night.